YouTube. Today in the Garage Gym Information playlist, I'm going to be reviewing the hypertrophy benefits of the SSB, so the safety squat bar. And the one that I personally recommend is the one by Elite FTS, the SS Yoke. It's the only one I've ever tried, but honestly, it's amazing. And if you can time your purchase right, you're going to save a ton of money on it because they run sales all the time. So that is the product that I personally recommend and use. So as far as the safety bar goes, it's something that has existed for a while, but it's really started to catch up in recent years. People are starting to realize the benefits and how great that bar is. Does it replace a straight bar? No, it's different, but for certain individuals, it can be a saving grace. The reason why is, unlike a normal bar where you have to go grab behind your head to position yourself for a squat, be it for low bar or high bar, with the SSB you grab in front of you, which makes all the difference for people who have shoulder pain, who have issues with mobility because of past injuries, and who can't squat anymore. That bar is going to allow you to squat again. And if you take that into consideration, you can also realize that, let's say you're someone who wants to do low bar squat and is sort of comfortable with it, but sometimes your elbows get beat up, your wrists get beat up, and you just don't want to, but you still need to do knee flexions. The SSB bar is going to save your life because you can still do it. You can still get your knee flexions in without having to potentially get yourself in position that is going to, flare up injuries or aggravate a tendinitis that you might try and nurse. So that's a good thing. That's an excellent application of the bar. But it doesn't really have anything to do with hypertrophy in the sense that it's an injury prevention machine. It's something you're going to use to work around injuries. And that's fine and all. But what does squatting with that type of SSB does compared to a straight bar? Well, first off, you need to consider where the weight sits. When you use a straight bar, the weight sits at the end of the bar. And depending on the stance, it's going to sit over mid-foot. With the SSB, it's different. You see, there are two ways to use the SSB because you can use it in two different manners. Actually, it's four, but let's talk about the first two. So as the SSB goes, it's just right there. It's out of sight of the camera, but you're going to put your head in between the two handles, and then it's going to rest on top of your neck, and the handles are going to be here, okay? So that if you do it normally with the logo in the back, depending on the brand, of course, the weight should sit slightly below you. Why? Because the bar is cambered. So the bar goes like this, and then it dips, but it doesn't dip at a perfect straight angle. It dips towards the back because the bar itself is angled. So the weight is going to sit behind you. That's one way to use it. But if you reverse it, right? If instead of using it like this, you just reverse the bar and you yourself go around and you go like this, if that makes sense. What did you just do? You inversed the angle of the cambered, meaning that now the weight is going to sit in front of you. So it's going to be in front. Some people never realize that. They end up realizing it one day where they just do their SSB and they realize that it's either way easier or way harder than it used to be, and they wonder why. It's because the way the weight was sitting on your back is now different. It's personally my opinion that when the weight is sitting back, it's much easier and it's harder when it's in front of you. Why? Because it increases the tendency of that bar to bend you in half, and that is what makes that bar so great, and also what makes it such a pain, because it's not your friend. This bar is not your friend. It's trying to beat you, and it's a completely different feeling. When you fail a lift with a straight bar on the squat, usually it's your structure that gives or your legs that give up, but it usually is just it's just your strength being sapped, right? It's like you cannot produce strength anymore and you just fall. With that, it's different. That bar, when it beats you in a fight because it's really trying to bend you over because of the way it sits on your shoulders. It's trying to fold you like an origami. And as you uncoil, you can really feel that it's really fighting you and that gravity is really pressing on you. I made that comparison before, but it's a completely different strength curve and it's a completely different feeling, and that's a great thing with that bar. This is also why it's recommended, because as far as hypertrophy goes, it is going to provide things that no squat variation can provide. And I'm going to get now into a common misconception that I hear a lot about the SSB. People say, oh, if you want to do front squats, but you don't have the technique for a front rack, just use an SSB. That is terrible advice. These two lifts have nothing to do with one another at all. The way the weight sits, the way the weight pushes on you, it's just completely different. A front squat is going to be mostly quad dominant. An SSB is anything but quad dominant. It's a lot more posterior chain and lower back. You barely feel your lower back in the front squat. This is also why it's recommended for people with lower back pain. Why? Because on the front squat, your torso needs to remain as vertical as possible. And you don't really have a way around it, because on the back squat, you can cheat because the weight is resting on your back. If the weight is folding you over, you can still get the weight up. Not in a front squat. In a front squat, if your torso angles gives and your thoracic extension dies, the bar is just going to fall. Because you just did this, it's falling. Gravity is not going to help you on this one. It's going to fall from the rack and you felt the lift. That's the front rack. It magnifies the thoracic weakness of your spine, because a lot of people who fail squats, it's the same. They're just folded over and they fell. The bar usually never rose above their head. Goodness gracious, because it would be very dangerous, but it's usually what happens. With a front squat, it's that, but you don't get a second chance. That thoracic extension is going to just kill the lift. With the SSB, that is completely out of the equation, because the bar is literally resting around your neck. There is no way for you to topple over and have the bar just go over your neck. It's not going to happen. So what happens is, once you have the middle ground with the barbell back squat, you have the front squat on the thoracic extension side of the spectrum, and then you have the SSB on the lumbar spine side of the spectrum, where this is going to really force you to have a torso angle shift. It's going to encourage the torso angle shift, and it's going to ask you to really get your back into it to get the weight up. It's just the natural way the bar is going to tilt you forward. And depending on the way you position the bar, as I explained, I really recommend you don't overdo it. Just do it the normal way with the weights in behind you, because it's already going to fold you in half a ton. If it's sitting in front, it's going to be magnified, and you don't want that. The bar is already tough enough as it is. And that's the two styles. So this is the thing where I've never really understood people who said that it replaces a front squat. It does not. Do not think it does. And as far as the other two options, you can also use the SSB in a front squat fashion, because you can either let it rest like this, or you can have the handles around your neck like this and grab, so you won't be able to do a front rack, but you can grab the SSB like this. And if you do that, same logic, you can have it sit behind you or in front of you when it comes to the camber of the bar. And I personally have never tried, because I can't do a front rack, so I don't have a reason to do that. But that is going to resemble a front squat much, much more. And because now the weight is not resting on your neck anymore, you're also removing the tendency of the bar to try and bend you forward, which is great because you're doing a front squat. So if you really want to do a front squat and you have an SSB, I think that if you're going to do the crossed arm stance, which I'm going to discuss in another video one day, you might want to go with the SSB, because it's going to offer more area to rest on your arms and it's going to be much more comfortable. So that's something that you can try. But that's not personally what I use it for. The main use of the SSB is going to be to have a knee flexion that is going to be much more of a hip hinge dominant movement. There are movements like this that are sort of hybrids and you don't really know where they are. And people like to discuss the spectrum of the hip hinge, and they would say that some things are pure hip hinges, some of them are hybrid. And to me, that's the SSB. The SSB is a pretty good hybrid in between the two. And outside of people who might use them because they don't have a choice, I think that even if you have an ability to do, straight barbell squats, even with no pain and you don't have any issues, you can still give the SSB a try. It's not going to be a revolution, but it's a different feeling. And that is going to be especially true if you do good mornings. The SSB was created for good mornings. It is the definite best way to do them. I've done them with a bar. The bar, there's just too much issue with it. Either you're going to want the weight to be way in front of you, so you're going to have to do it with a high bar position while the weight is resting on your neck, which is not a position you want to be in when you bend over because it's super dangerous. Or you're going to want to be more comfortable and you're going to do a low bar. But when that happens, I feel like the weight is way too far back and it makes the lift way too easy. And it stops really being it's more of a lower back squat really, because the lower back, the low bar squat it's also a lower back squat, but the low bar squat is really going to involve more posterior chain, and you're really just doing a slight variation of a low bar squat when you do that. So for me, if you want to do good mornings and you have an SSB, do them with the SSB. It's going to be the worst and the best at the same time, because you will be able to just stop worrying so much about where the bar is positioned and if it's going to roll or not, which do not have any impact on hypertrophy, by the way, and on muscular development. It's just worrying. Same logic with the deadlift. When you're trying to figure out your grip and you're afraid it's going to slip, yeah, that's not helping you getting a bigger back. It's hurting you. So for the SSB, you're going to be nice and comfy. And you're going to find, if you do it the normal way with the weight back, that as you bend forward, since the good morning is already a hip hinge that is going to topple you over, it's the nature of the lift, with an SSB it's even worse, because the SSB is going to allow you to go comfortably down, but then as you push up, you really feel the weight of the bar resisting you. And to me, there's no better feeling, meaning that I really cannot go back to doing good mornings with a straight bar, because with the SSB, it feels like a good morning. It feels like what a good morning should be. It's the perfect strength curve. It offers the perfect resistance. So I would even say that, to me, the SSB is much more of a hip hinge dominant equipment than a knee flexion equipment, because even as you do a normal squat with it, you're going to find that your torso angle is going to be much more forward. You're going to have much more movement in the lower back. That being said, words of caution with that bar. Because there is so much lower back involvement, it can also lead to injury. So if you want to do it to prevent injury in the long run, you need to keep that in mind. And also, for people like me who are narrow and who tend to have very narrow stances, you're going to find with that bar that you cannot squat to depth. Because as you grab narrow and as your stance is narrow, your knees and your elbows are going to run into your legs. So unless you do this, which I wouldn't advise because it kills the upper back packing and the mobility and the rigidity of the upper back, it's going to damage your ability to go down in the hole. So you might do something like a box squat. That's what I really like with the SSB. A box squat, it's a ton of posterior chain, it's a great movement. And to finish, I just want to mention also the involvement of the upper back in the SSB, because just like a front squat, a normal barbell back squat that's in the middle, as I said, is already going to recruit the upper back, because you're holding. If you're squatting properly, you're tight and you're trying to bend that bar on your back. So the upper back is being recruited. It's also being recruited on a front squat to an extent, because what's keeping the elbows up is of course your technique, but it's also the strength of the thoracic extension, and the thoracic extension is being helped and aided by the upper back muscles. For this guy, when you have those handles here, not only are you going to use a lot of middle back and lower back to get up because the bar is trying to bend you, but you're also going to have to require a lot of thoracic extension so that this here, that position here, remains stable and you don't end up like this. And that to me feels very natural, meaning that if I wanted to teach someone how to remain stable and strong on the barbell back squat so that they didn't good morning the weight up, I would have them do some SSB, because it really teaches you that. And it might be counterintuitive, but lifts that are going to exaggerate some portions of the lift that are usually considered bad form, like the good morning, for example, can actually teach people not to do that. Because if you have someone who good mornings their barbell back squat, and you make them do good mornings, they're going to realize that that amount of hip hinge that they're giving into for the good morning is appropriate for that lift, but it's not something that should be carried over 100% to the barbell squat, and it might help them work on their technique. I think the SSB can actually do that too. And as far as the comparison, I just want to leave you with this because to me it's a powerful image. So for me, I've always found that the difference between a front squat and an SSB is night and day, because when you do a front squat, what it feels like is, it feels like someone is grabbing you by your shirt and is pulling you forward. So when you fall, it feels like someone is grabbing you and is trying to tilt you forward, okay? For the SSB, I think like it's the opposite. It feels like someone is putting their hand on your upper back and it's trying to press on you. It's trying to like bend you. It's not pulling you back like some people might find on the back squat when they put too much heel into it. It's really just trying to fold you. And you will find that if you can resist that fold, you can really push the intensity in windows that would usually be damaged by the structural integrity of your body and the mechanical failure that would occur. So that's a great tool for hypertrophy, for the legs, for the back. So I really recommend it if you have the space, the money, if you know your gym owner, encourage them to get an SSB because it's going to be a great tool. That's going to be that. Any question about the SSB, let me know in the comments. Have a good day.